Are you serious right now? Hey guys, it's WolfeManC&W from the C&W, and here are we with another video, switching it up today. I guess I'm going to kind of ramble, but also at the same time, I got a list of things I want to talk about. There's been an influx of commercial-based movies a lot in these last few years that I've noticed. And there you can see that by the main example I can think of off the top of my head is Space Jam 2, or Space Jam: A New Legacy, which just is Warner Bros. Throwing every character that's under their belt at the camera. CGI. CGI is cool, but too much. It's like digital vomit. I enjoy Ready Player One. I know that has a lot of commercial stuff, like you think of Halo, or Mortal Kombat, or every other type of character they thrown in there, Iron Giant, and then the DeLorean's thrown in there. But it's still an enjoyable movie. I guess it's every nerds galore, especially mine, I would say. There's movies like Power Rangers that throw in Bumblebee, but you know Transformers is Hasbro along with Power Rangers, but it's just like try to get the product out. The movie is somewhat enjoyable. The 90s ones are better. And Transformers, the Michael Bay ones mainly, is just an opportunity to just flow the cash out, because you know you try to get every commercial brand you in there, everything from Mountain Dew to Bentleys to Chevy or a Pontiac. I remember the first movie did that. Or there's so many brands in there you could just call it commercial heaven. So you're welcome, TV. Michael Bay saved you. Marvel, Star Wars, and DC have become assembly lines for the film industry, honestly, where it's all about quantity over quality at this point. Trying to get all the TV shows they can, all the movies they can. Don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff in there. But you think people are getting a little exhausted of this, and when it becomes a little too much, and then more, and then more, and then it's like when you want to watch one movie, it's like, do you really need to watch it? Why is it released? You just catch up on the next movie, or you gotta watch this TV show to understand this point, or this, and it's like one of those crime shows where there's the whole web chart there, and you're trying to decipher where the original killer is in the horror movie, something like that. And then eventually you just get lost and you're just like, I don't care anymore. Before we get any further, we probably should backtrack a little bit and start with the history of the sequel formula. Movies dating back to the 60s and 70s mainly were original films, like Good, Bad, and Ugly, or Lawrence of Arabia, or Psycho, before it got remade 30 years later. Offered us a new light of movies and always kept bringing us original stories. Yeah, maybe movies were based off of a book, which a lot of movies are based off of books, but there wasn't really a sense of remakes. It was just idea, put it together, authentic story, and it's out. Until the Planet of the Apes franchise came into play and started dabbling with this idea of, what if we make more than one movie? What if we make a whole franchise? And there's tons of the movies, I can't even name them all, but I'm sure you just do a Google search, look up Planet of the Apes franchise, and bam, there you go. But it was the OG MCU, which brought a lot of content, an intriguing story, this original story, and it branched out to multiple movies, which was fine. It was something new, something original, but not so much today. The 80s brought us a lot of original films as well, and also starting this new cycle of sequels. But there's a lot of great trilogies and franchises that were birthed from the 80s, like Back to the Future, right there, best movie of all time. Sorry, not sorry. Also Indiana Jones. All three movies are great, ignoring Crystal Skull again years later. Also, the formula did work. I remember watching, I think it was one of, was it History, or Behind the Screenplay, this channel, I'd probably buff that, but he did a video talking about Alien versus like Aliens, or it was Terminator 2 versus Aliens, and how to make the sequel good, and how James Cameron was able to make both of these movies and make them a huge success that wasn't the original, which made a sequel great. Made it people wanted to see the story continue, and pretty much the whole thing is that it keeps the original concept but brings in a new view. Like you see, the first Alien movie is a horror, and then the second one is an action-packed like thriller type movie. You have the same premise, but you get a new look at it, and you see with Terminator, the first one, horror, second one, action-packed thriller. Keeps you engaged, keeps you wanting more, and understand it's a new story. It's the same story with another level, switching up the genre to make you want to see more. So it's like a little cycle, you know. You always want to try something new, but you always want to try to please to the fans why you started this story in the first place. So like works all interconnected in one big one big bundle. Of course, over time, random sequels were released. Of course, like for Revenge of the Nerds or Tremors, maybe switched up the cast and totally thought of a random story, but stuck to the concept of whatever the movie was. But mostly people didn't really pay attention to them, and like everyone moved on. It was just there, and mostly snubbed. But there, you go watch it and be like, "This is something." Do I care? No. I'm gonna watch Back to the Future again. Now with the 21st century, a new player in the game shows up, and you know, with comic books, they're all over the place. But now, in the cinemas, they're all over the place, and that was Marvel, starting in the late '90s. You may have some shows and cartoons and stuff like, you know, Spider-Man in the '90s series, or any other random like cartoons or spin-offs and stuff. But Marvel really started to pick up the pace in the late '90s with its cinema debut with Blade, the Blade trilogy. And that really started pulling in audiences to be like, Marvel on the big screen? Like, what could this be? What could they do? Where could they take this? How will it compare to the comics? And Blade was a box office success, just missing the top 25 grossing movies of 1998. It was just close. Like, this close. Two more films were made, and of the second and the third one, Trinity, but they were a bit washy and mostly ignored. But Blade did pave the way for Marvel to go skyrocket into the film frenzy extravaganza bombardment, which would lead to the MCU. But before we get there, of course we had Spider-Man in 2002 and the trilogy that followed, which is the main highlight of the 2000s and Marvel success, especially X-Men as well. Spider-Man and X-Men like carried the Marvel on their shoulders, because like Hulk, 2003, Daredevil, Elektra, even Fantastic Four were all pushovers compared to Spider-Man and X-Men, which had authentic characters we love from the comics, and also added a cinema twist to it to make it see on the big screen. Like, you never would have imagined this would have happened in the 80s, and the superhero frenzy was skyrocketing, and nobody knew where it was going. Of course, we can't forget about other franchises that also helped build up this cinematic universe we know as today, is like Harry Potter films, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit later on, and also even Terminator was in there too, funneling out movies. But like I said, just like Tremors and Revenge of the Nerds, often ignored or totally snubbed, and people, their main love for the franchise was like new directors, maybe a new studio did not care about the previous sequels or the previous films, and people got angry, and people were not happy with what they were doing with some of these franchises. So original stories started to fade into the shadows. Usually the uprising of remakes, sequels, prequels started coming into light, and original stories were in trouble. They were still kind of there, but still in trouble because it's all about the big box office movie during the summer, which everyone would go see. The MCU and DCU invasion begins. We see DC go mental with their movies, trying to find their identity, but they clearly didn't know what they were doing. Start with Man of Steel. A few years later, throw Batman v Superman at us. Act like they're all cool and dark and stuff, and MCU is all bright and glittery. And it's like it's all butting heads, but at least Marvel had a set plan. They knew where they were going for the 10 years since 2008 when Iron Man released. And then we saw these different corporations, 20th Century Fox and Paramount. And then Disney would eventually, scoop up Paramount. And eventually even scoop up Fox. 20th Century Fox and Monopoly. Mr. Monocle will be looking out there, but still ignoring them. Oh, and also, can't forget about Sony playing games with MCU with Spider-Man, where just after Spider-Man 3, they just threw Amazing Spider-Man at us, and where the MCU was going on, Avengers just released, and they were just like, this is our precious boy, and you keep doing your own thing over there. But eventually they would have to give in, and, halfway. They put their foot in the grave, but they still could pull it out anytime they wanted. And even still today, in 2023, it's still questionable what Sony's going to do with Spider-Man. Seems like there's more comfort with X-Men and Blade and all those characters than we are with Spider-Man, because we have no clue what's going to happen next. And now, eventually, DC and Marvel will just be butting heads for the next decade, and all about is who can make more money. And the Rotten Tomatoes or audience score doesn't even matter more. It's just like, if you make more money, another movie. If you want to keep telling your story, but people just don't care, and they like Morbius or Venom or something, the story has to continue, and it'll just keep going. And it feels like it will never end. It'll probably be the end of the universe, and we'll probably see Venom 100 or something. That, if you ever watch Back to the Future 2, where Marty's in the street and the hologram shark comes at him to bite him and his jaw's 19. Steven Spielberg made a joke about that. It's not so funny anymore.